Okay, hello, good afternoon. Welcome to the civil procedure tutorial of 13th July 2026. Now for this class, we'll be just going through mainly the first activity, which deals with the computation of judgment interest and how to calculate using the timeline. So the objectives of today's session is compute judgment interest, and when it comes to judgment interest, there is two types. So I'll just use a different color for that. Pre-judgment and then post-judgment. And what is the judgment interest? That's right, it's 5.3% per annum on a daily basis, right? The second objective is to draw timelines when doing so for the interest. They're very important, as you will see later on. And last but not least is to calculate cost. Now, just a caveat. For cost, remember there's two types also, right? The first type is fixed cost. And the second type is assessed. Now, what does this mean? Fixed cost given by court, right? Then how about assessed? Assessed refers to later date. But that's not the important part. The important part is that when it comes to assess, you have to deal with the bills of cost, also known as B/C. What this means is that you have to compute the tax by itself. Compute tax. It's not given. Okay, so let's not get ahead of ourselves, right? Let's first analyze the question. So the first main timeline we have over here is the 2nd of April, so known as my birthday, for the sum of 188K. So we can point out that this means it's district court. Now, after the defense was filed, took out the application for summary judgment. What does summary judgment remind you of? That's right. You have to go back to Appendix 1, Order 21, if you want to look at the course. However, as you can read, it says that on 16 June, the court awarded a partial judgment. What is partial judgment? All right, if you go to your notes over here, when it comes to summary judgment, there's some types of judgment. Firstly, dismissing the application by the court. Secondly, granting the defendant to defend himself under certain conditions. And what was happening here was partial judgment to the claimant, right? Order 9, Rule 17. So we can write here as a footnote. Sum of $88,000 with interest on the said sum. Blah, blah, blah. The court also made an order for cost in favor of court of $8,000. And what kind of cost is this? That's right. It's fixed cost. All right. And another caveat you got to remember is whenever there's money involved, there are three things. First is the principal, aka the amount you're trying to claim. Second is interest. And lastly is cost. And these are the three things that we're going to be calculating today for both judgments. And why do I say both judgments? Because it's a partial judgment. The thing you got to know about partial judgment is that the first judgment happens, right? In this case, it's 88K before the second one. So I'll be using a different color for the second judgment. Maybe I'll use purple. So what is the second judgment then? It's the balance of 100K. Okay, now we're 5 minutes into the recording. I suggest we should actually, hurry and start the analysis. So begin by first drawing the timeline. This is 2nd April, aka, when 188,000 was being claimed. Right, and this will come with their interest, cost, yeah. Now, just a caveat, this is just the amount being claimed. This is not judgment, right? Claimant wants to claim these. I can't spell it right. Claim these. Now, the first major timeline, right? The first major milestone happens on the first judgment date, which is this, right? 16 June here. So 16 June over here. This is when the court awarded 88K, right? And it comes with own interest and cost. Okay, so this is the first judgment. Remember, when it's partial, it's not complete. So then, what happens after the first judgment? That's right. Go on reading. 12 October, court gave judgment for the balance. So what is the balance? That's right, $100,000. And what color did I say I would use? It's purple. So here we go. Second judgment, which is 12 October, for the balance of 100K, right? And at this stage, we can actually calculate interest. Now, cost is kind of interesting because as you can see here, the cost is only given on 16 November, right? And this is your bill of cost. And what kind of costs are these? That's right. They are your assessed costs. Why? Because the damn question used the word assess, and assess refers to a later date when you assess the cost. So as we can see here, I'm going to use the purple color. All right, we got 16th November, and this is the cost we're given. And I want you to understand why I color coded as such, because first judgment is red. Everything under here refers to first judgment, whereas all these purple scribblings refer to the second judgment. So don't confuse them. And last but not least, we got 30 November, which is today. Why do I say that? If you read the question, it is now 30 November. Compute the total amount due by Lee today. So without further ado, let's get started. Let's zoom in on to the first judgment. All right. So we have the principal. We have the cost. How much is the cost? That's right. It's $8,000. As you can see over here, the court also made an order for cost in favor of $8,000, and this is a fixed cost, and hence I wrote fixed over there. And you don't gotta calculate no interest or tax or whatever. You can just use this amount straight away. So you have these two. Now you gotta find the damn interest. And how do you go about doing that? That is the question. Okay, so when it comes to interest, right, regardless of first or second judgment, two things you gotta always calculate. The first one is this darn thing called the pre-judgment interest, right? Then the second part is called, now what color did I use for post-judgment? I use blue for post-judgment. Okay, so we're zooming onto post-judgment here. What does post-judgment means? It means from 17th June to 30 November. That is post-judgment. Right? And pre-judgment is from 2nd April to 16th June. Now, don't get confused. We're only looking at judgment 1 currently, right? So you can ignore all this for now. We're just looking at judgment 1. So how do you calculate? How do you go about doing this damn thing? Right. So, okay, here we go. So first judgment is $88,000, right? Now interest at 5.33% from 2nd April to 16th June. This is what I'm doing over here. Pre-judgment cost, right? It happens before the judgment day. Oops. Right, so you take out your damn calculator. You go 76 days over 365. Right, this is the days times the interest rate times the principal. Right, and what do you get? You get 76 over 365 times 5.33 over 100 times 88, 1, 2, 3. You get $976.63. So right, if it ain't clear, I'm going to underline it for you. Now you got a judgment interest, right, for the pre-judgment. Pre-judgment period. The judgment interest is $976.63. And as you recall, this is just the interest, right? So you got to add it with the principal amount of $88,000. Sorry, $8,000, right? So what do you get when you add those two dang things up? You get this. And this is called judgment debt. And why do you got to know judgment debt, right? So one thing you got to understand is that total amount accrued for pre-judgment period. And when I mean accrued, I mean this includes the interest and the principal that you're trying to claim, right? This is Loan Sharks Economics 101. Total amount accrued for pre-judgment at the date of 16th June, right, can be referred to as judgment debt. AKA, what do you get? $96,976.63. And why do you got to know that? Because over here I wrote post-judgment principal equals to judgment debt. So I don't know why I write that damn thing there. So over here you got the interest at 5.33%, and then from 17th June to 30th November, which is today, is 167 days. So you may be wondering, what is the principal amount here? Well, the principal amount is the judgment debt, which equals to this amount that you just calculated. So technically, you can just copy and paste this damn thing over here. And what do you get? What you did was 167 days times 5.33% times judgment debt, which is the one you just calculated. You get the interest, right? Interest amount. Then you got to add the interest amount to the judgment debt to finally get the total answer here. Yeah. So I've talked a lot. The main takeaway from this should be that total amount due, right? You always got to plus the interest plus the principal, right? So without further ado, let's move on to the second timeline. Now, the second timeline deals with second judgment, right? So for the second judgment, you got to do the same damn thing. So I will begin by writing in purple because second judgment is purple. Judgment 2. Okay, so likewise, judgment was given on 12th October. So the pre-judgment will be considered. Okay, it's here. Pre-judgment is 2nd April to 12th April. Sorry, 12th October. And then for post-judgment, I like to use blue. So then it'll be from 13th October to 30 November. And now you gotta do the damn thing again. Right, so pre-judgment. Let's try it out, shall we? Let's be fast and efficient now. Oh my lord, I meant to use red for pre-judgment. Oh, the stars. Remember, pre-judgment is red and post-judgment is blue. Because after you realize how much money you own after the judgment, you are in the blues, right? So this is post once again, and this is pre. Because the money was awarded on 12th October of 100K, and this shall be deemed as the principal. And remember, you only got to calculate the principal and the interest because the cost is given at another date. And we'll deal with that mumbo jumbo later on. So how do you deal with pre-interest, right? So pre-interest equals to days over 365 times 5.33%, which is 5.33 over 100 times 100K. And how many days is from 2nd April to 12th October? Well, I can't remember for the love of me. So let's just look at the answer. 194 days. And you get, I hope you're working this out as we go along. We get $2,832.93. And this is just the interest. And remember, you got to add up the interest and the principal. So then total amount due on 12th October, aka judgment debt, equals to 100K plus $2,832.93, which is equivalent to $102,832.93. Right. So this is for this amount, right? For this timeline. And now you gotta calculate post-judgment. You gotta put post equals to, right? We can just copy and paste this thing. Right? Times 5.33% over the amount of days from 13th October to 30th November. And remember, for post-judgment, we use blue. So I'm going to turn this damn thing blue. Right? And how many days is that? 13 October to 20 November. It's 49 days. So 49 over 365. And you get $735.80. And remember, this is the interest, and you gotta always add the interest up with the principal. So you get 102,832.93 plus 735.80, and you get $1,035.68. Right, and this is the total amount due for the second judgment. Shit ain't sweet, because things are a bit different, because the cost is assessed at a later date. So what you gotta do now is you gotta find out the amount of cost at first, and then the post-cost interest. Yeah. But bear with me, yeah? So we'll look at cost now. This is the third timeline, which is for cost. I'm going to use purple for everything. Okay? So this is 2nd April. Right? Cost is 16th November. 16th November and 30th November. Now, this is what we call as cost. And then this, as you can tell from me using blue now, is post-assessment interest. And the funny thing about post-assessment interest is we don't look at 17th November. No, we actually stick to 16th November. So we actually just, we got to calculate it twice. But there's a difference in doing that. So how do you calculate cost, right? The first thing is the three sections, you add them up together, you get 12,800. So let me use red for this. You get 12,800. You add all this up together, it's assessed, you get 12,800. Then after that, you add the allocator, which is found in the fourth schedule. It's basically the court taxing the poor fella. You scroll to the fourth schedule, number 40, right? It says it's district court is 6%, right? Then after that, you gotta add the registrar certificate of $20 because it's the district court. So those are the two taxes that you gotta add. So $12,800, 6% tax, and then the $20 registrar certificate, and you will get the right amount of $13,588, and this is due on 16th November. So $38,000 and $588. So that is for the pre-cost. We just call it cost. Now for post-assessment interest, right? It's simple. The rules of court, right? The rules of court says that the assessment date actually starts inclusive of 16th November. So 16th November to 30th November is actually 15 days. So what we got to do is 15 over 365 times 5.33, because 5.33% interest rate is the standard for everything in the rules of court unless proven otherwise, times the principal amount of 13,588, which you should know by now is referred to as judgment debt for judgment, right? And you will get the amount of $29.76, and you got to add this to the cost, and you will get the total amount, which is $13,000, $617 and 76 cents. So this is the cost, right? So the first judgment is this, right? The second judgment, what color do I use for the second judgment? Purple, right? Second judgment is this. And then the third thing you gotta add is cost, which is this much. So you gotta add everything up, and then you'll get the final answer, which is $216,528.05. And that is why I started with the caveat that when it comes to assess cost, right, you gotta calculate the interest also. So as you can see here for the second judgment, you can calculate interest and 100,000, but the cost is at a later date. And since it's assessed, you gotta assess the cost, which is here, right? And then the post-assessment cost, which is here. Whereas for this first judgment, the cost is fixed. So you just gotta add up $8,000. And that, my friend, concludes the first question. Thank you very much.